Our study this morning is in the second chapter of the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 2. Ezekiel chapter 2. We have visitors here from down southern Ohio. Appreciate Pam being here, and we have visitors from afar off, long ways off, and we're excited to be here this morning. It's really a beautiful. Pardon me? Well, I said from afar off. Yeah. Yeah, they are from afar off. Second chapter of Ezekiel. Now, the first chapter of Ezekiel was prominent with a vision that would identify to Ezekiel the glory of God, His magnificence, and with those, that vision of a chariot sustained by four different configurations of animals, including the face of man, wheels and wings, cherubims. Well, that would have been an awesome sight for the prophet. And of course, we don't know why that the vision was in that frame. However, let's suppose, preacher, let's suppose you were Ezekiel, and let's suppose we were, had been captured, taken from Jerusalem, planted in a place 600 miles away, probably with no houses, probably with no, obviously no running water except the river or the canal. No amenities of any kind, probably struggling for food. What would have been our attitude? What would have been our disposition? It would have been probably less than pleasant and happy and affable. And so in that situation, Ezekiel is told, and Ezekiel's name implies that God strengtheneth. And in the text it says that these people are going to be obstinate. They're going to be belligerent. They're not going to want to hear what you have to say. And God said He'd make Ezekiel's forehead as flint. Now, that's pretty tough, pretty strong. So I suppose in a sense it's no wonder the audience was so terrible. His audience was so terrible because of their situation. Now, should they have had that attitude? Well, probably not. Would it be human nature for him to have that attitude, or for them to have that attitude? Probably, because God had God allowed them to be transported. And then the first 24 chapters of Ezekiel is all about doom and gloom with regard to their homeland. His message wasn't something they wanted to hear. I mean, it might have been different if he would have been able to say, well, folks, we're over here, but in a few months we're going to go back to Jerusalem. We're going to get some help to build the walls, and things are going to be pleasant like they used to be. If he had that kind of a message, boy, they would have been, drinking it in. He didn't have that kind of a message. He said it's going to be bad. The temple's going to go. And then, of course, we have that historical perspective from Jeremiah and other prophets. But so in the first chapter, we find that Ezekiel was all caught up in this vision to the point where he fell to the ground, and then a voice came to him and said, in chapter 2, verse 1, and this spirit being, the spiritual being, the spirit being said, and he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee. He may have been in some sort of a semi-unconscious state, but he's brought to attention. Stand on their feet. In other words, he's saying, look, get with it. You've got a job to do. You've got a commission. I mean, that's my impression of what this was all about. You've got a commission. So he stood, and apparently, and the Spirit entered into him, and the Spirit entered into me, Ezekiel says, when he spake unto me, and set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. And he said unto me, Son of man. By the way, Ezekiel is addressed as the Son of Man 93 times in the book of Ezekiel. Now I'm wondering why all that emphasis on Son of Man.
I was going to ask you that, because that's what they call Jesus, isn't it?
Well, he was referred to that. He was referred to a deity as well as man. Yeah, yes. So the Son of Man. Ezekiel was. Look, he was in the presence of God, wasn't he? In chapter 1, he was in the presence of God. Now, we have to, he was man. He was only man. He wasn't deity. He was man, and there's that emphasis on him being man, human, not deity, not anything really special in terms of his relationship to God, except that God commissioned him. But he wasn't in any way taking on any let's say character of God, except as he would obey God. He was pure man, Son of Man. Verse 3, he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel. Now, I don't know whether there's any important meaning to that children of Israel. Where had they been extracted from? Judah. You know, the tribe of Judah particularly. But that might imply, and I'm not saying it does, but it might imply that some of the Jews from the northern tribes, they were in Assyria. The Babylonians took over Assyria, and there might have been some of those people from the other tribes in that company there. He said, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. Now, I suppose if a preacher is looking for a congregation, suppose a preacher is kind of trying out a very congregation, probably if he gives a sermon or a practice, I don't know, what do they do? They try out, you try out, preachers try out, is that kind of what it is? Suppose a preacher's trying out at a congregation and everybody is mad-faced. Everybody said, yeah, right. Yeah, preacher. And some of them walking out, some of them, kind of maybe even physically throwing something. Probably not a good situation, right? Probably not. That's not where you'd want to go. So here's Ezekiel. He needs a lot. It seems like he needs a lot of encouragement to deal with this flock, and from time to time, as we go through Ezekiel, we'll see this image, that he saw in chapter 1. We'll see this image that reassures him that God's presence is there. He needed encouragement. He said, it's just kind of interesting to me that, the Spirit, God through the Spirit here is saying, your audience is going to be terrible. Why would you want to go there? They're rebellious. Well, and they're imprudent. That's hard-headed, hard-hearted. They are nasty. They're not going to be very, when the sermon's over, nobody's going to probably be saying, boy, that was a good job. We learned a lot today. Probably there isn't going to be any of that thing going on. They're imprudent, stiff-hearted, hard-headed. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, thus saith the Lord God. And they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. And parenthetically, in the King James Version, for they are a rebellious house. Now, that's interesting. And we don't necessarily come across that in other scriptures about, whether they listen or not, whether they accept this or not, whether they reject it. He says, and they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, or that is, not listen, not take it to heart, yet shall ye know that there hath been a prophet among them. Yet shall know that there hath been a prophet among them. They wouldn't have any excuse at the end game here. They wouldn't have any excuse. There's a prophet among them, whether they listen to it or not. Now, I don't think Ezekiel records, how much receptivity they had. I don't read where they, where he says, well, some of them were converted, some of them repented. We don't have that information. We might ask the question: do you suppose Ezekiel was held accountable for the results? Was he held accountable for the number of conversions that you see? What was his job? What? His job was to carry out the mission, be obedient to the mission that he was assigned, right? That was the mission. It was very clear there. Then he also says, and thou son of man, there that son of man comes to go, be not afraid of them. Now remember that. Be not afraid of them. Neither be afraid of their words. Well, he's going to get some Not going to get very many amens when he's preaching. He's probably getting, something just the opposite of that. The words like, "Hey, you crazy old coot, what are you talking about?" And then he further describes them, "Though briars and thorns be with you." Now, briars and thorns are not exactly a good thing to have in your path if you're going down through the woods or whatever. Well, briars and thorns, we know somebody described as a briar or a thorn, not good. Though briars and thorns be with thee, and thou dost dwell among scorpions. This is not good. Scorpions. He refers them as scorpions. Snakes. The worst kind of description you could have for a population, he's describing here. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks. I suppose if you were in an audience of any kind and people started scowling and making negative facial expressions, it would be kind of discouraging, wouldn't it? Well, he says, don't be afraid of their lousy looks or dirty looks. He says, do not be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. Comes back to that rebellious house, rebellious. In verse 7, and thou shalt speak my words unto them. What? Regardless of their attitude, their disposition, regardless of their willingness or unwillingness to hear, thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. For they are most rebellious. Boy, this is kind of discouraging here. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious. Would it be kind of prone if the prophet, the preacher, or the presenter, might one become calloused, and might one become unwilling to continue? I mean, after so many presentations where everybody's scowling and yelling and not having any favorable interaction, it might be a person might be prone to, well, God, I forget about this. I'm out of here. Let them go. That would be rebellion on the part of the prophet, you see. And when I looked, and behold, a hand was sent. A hand. A hand. Apparently not attached to anything. A hand. A hand was there. Another, I think, a reassurance of the presence of God in his commission here. I think an encouragement. And I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. And he spread it before me. The hand, this independent hand, spread it before him. This scroll, we know they didn't have books like we have bound today, but the scroll. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was written therein. And he spread it before me, And it was written within and without, King James Version says, and meaning that it was on the front and the back. Usually writing was on one side, but here this scroll was written on the front and the back. And there were written therein lamentations, mourning, and woe. That was the message, right? That was the message that he was to give to the audience. 24 chapters of Ezekiel relate to, the first 24 chapters relate to lamentations, mourning, woe. Not a good message. You know, when a presenter has good things to say about the audience, good things to say about what's going to happen in the future. When a presenter can say, you know, there's a bright future, you know, things are not good here, but eventually, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt told the American people in the depths of the Depression, there's going to be a chicken in every pot. What does that mean? Well, there are going to be good times ahead. Gave them courage, gave them something to look forward to. Not any message on that scroll had anything pleasant to say to the people. And so, Ezekiel, here's what you're going to present. Woe, lamentations, mourning. Then in chapter 3 is just a continuation. I don't know why there's a chapter break there, but it's just a continuation. Moreover, in chapter 3, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest. Eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. Now, when John was on the Isle of Patmos, there was a little book that he was told to eat. And in his mouth it was sweet. But when it got in his stomach, it was bitter. Revelation letter. So this is kind of an interesting, eat this roll, this paper, this book, eat it. Well, so he opened his mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels, satisfy yourself, as King James says, at the center column reference, with this roll that I give thee. That did I eat, and my mouth was sweet, or as honey for sweetness. And then he said unto me, Son of man, go get thee unto the house of Israel, and speak with my words unto them. What's this? What's with this eating a roll? What's the motivation? What's the intent of eating the? He did. Yeah. Sweet as honey. What was it? What's the lesson there? What's the message there? He was to internalize the message. The message was to be part of him. Is that right? Now, yeah. Yeah. For those who are tuned in by live stream, Pam says that we are not to live by bread alone. It's a matter of internalizing a preacher or other religious presenter or whatever that doesn't, internalize the message, and it isn't a part of that person, it's hard for them to fake it, isn't it? I mean, if they don't really believe it, if they really don't, it's really not a part of them. If they're not living it, hard to fake it, isn't it? And I think the message to Ezekiel was that you internalize this. You gobble it up, so to speak. And it has to be part of you. You got to believe it. You've got to be totally sincere about this message.
And I feel today that many of us may even be in the situation that Ezekiel was as we try to go into the world and speak to others about the gospel. And they reject us. And I know that I have many times felt like I hit a brick wall and trying to talk to people about the gospel, and they reject it, and comments that are made that are unnecessary. We can also become very discouraged in trying to present that message.
Yeah, Pam is saying that we could run into the same kind of situation here, wherein we might run into, as she said, brick walls as we present information to folks. Moreover, well then let's go on in verse 2 of chapter 3. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat the roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and to fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. And he said unto me, Son of man, go and get thee unto the house of Israel, and speak with my words unto them. For thou art not sent to a people of strange speech, or a hard language, but to the house of Israel. It's kind of interesting to me that we don't get much of a glimpse of how the people responded to the message, except the scripture keeps going over and over that, they're a rebellious people. But he says, you're not, it's not as if you're going to, in this, at this particular time, it's not as if you're going to a people where you don't understand the language. However, there was in chapters 25 to 32 in Ezekiel, he did pronounce, or he did have a message for the pagan nations. But in this instance, he said, you are on the same page as far as language is concerned. Now, we can imagine Ezekiel being a priest, and he was among those 10,000 that were carried away into captivity during the reign of Jehoiachin. We can imagine that Ezekiel, as a priest, he was in a prominent, position in Judah. I don't know whether he ever served as a priest at the temple in Jerusalem, but he was probably known to be a priest among the population there, and so he had, the advantage of he's being a Jew, speaking to the Jews, relating to the Jews, and that's that's pretty important to have a relationship like that. Speakers oftentimes, they often say something like, well, I'm really glad to be here, I'm just like one of you, and they relate to some incident that happened in their community that he knew about, and all that sort of thing, to develop some rapport with the audience. Well, he already had a rapport. Now, it might not have been a a great rapport, and it might not have been a positive one when he started speaking, but he was one of them. God points that out to him. You're one of them. Verse 6, not too many people of a strange speech or of a hard language, whose words thou canst not understand. Surely, had I sent thee to them, they would have hearkened to thee. Now, isn't that interesting? He says, if I'd have sent you to that, what does that remind you of? Does Jonah come to mind? Jonah. He was sent to Nineveh. And you know what the end of that was? His sermon resonated with those of Nineveh. And they repented. And God is saying here, and there are other examples of people being, on the day of, shortly, a few years after Pentecost, Cornelius, a Roman, he was amenable to the gospel. Not to many people of a strange language, but if I'd have sent you there, they would have hearkened. That doesn't speak very well of God's people, the Jews, right? His own, the people that he nourished for hundreds of years as a nation. And God is saying, the heathen would have been more receptive. Verse 7, but the house of Israel will not hearken unto thee. Now this is interesting. He's saying, Ezekiel, you're not going to have much success with this group, because he says they're not going to hearken. They're not going to listen. For they will not hearken unto me. Why wouldn't they hearken unto Ezekiel? Because they didn't hearken unto God. For all the house of Israel are imprudent and hard-hearted. Wow. He keeps coming back over that. They're imprudent. They're hard-headed. Behold, in verse 8, I have made thy face strong against their faces. He says, stand up to them. I'll make your forehead strong against their forehead. As an adamant, a stone, as a stone, as an adamant harder, I'll make thy head as hard as flint. Figuratively speaking. They're stubborn. I'm going to make you just as adamant against them. An adamant, harder than flint have I made thy forehead. Fear them not, neither be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. It comes back to this looks. They're going to look at you as though you are stupid, or that you don't know what you're talking about. They are not going to be. They're not going to be affable, pleasant. Your audience is going to be, just. I was in an audience one time where the Secretary of Education, United States Secretary of Education, was speaking, and how politicians go, big deal, and the audience, and these were respectable people in the audience. They started booing and yelling. I looked around, and here people were, and the Secretary of Education said, "Oh, folks, this audience is above that kind of behavior." That kind of quieted them down a little bit, but they didn't like what he was saying, and so, he could have been, had he not been kind of clever, he could have been run off the stage, so to speak. But that's probably mild to what Ezekiel faced. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, all my words that I shall speak unto thee, receive in thine heart, and hear with thine ears. Now, internalize it. Have this become a part of you. This needs to be what you are, who you are. You need to be. This needs to be part of you. Moreover, let's read that again. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, all my words that I shall speak unto thee, receive in thine heart, and hear with thine ears. And go and get thee to them of captivity. Now, Ezekiel had this vision of the glory of God, the awesomeness of God. He's eat this scroll, and this heavenly being is telling him, don't be afraid of them. Going to make you harder. Your forehead's going to be harder than theirs. So now get moving. Get to your mission. Go and get them. Get thee to them of the captivity unto the children of thy people, and speak unto them. It's interesting, it said the children of thy people. I wonder why God wasn't saying my people. Well, there might be some relevance there, but thy people, and speak unto them, and tell them, Thus saith the Lord God, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. Coming back to that idea. Then the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of a great rushing. Now, when Ezekiel saw this vision, he was by the river Kedar. Okay? Apparently the community, the focus of the community was not in that area. And so the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of great rushing. Now, does this imply that he was physically transported to another location? I don't know. It kind of seems that way, but I'm not sure about that. Blessed be that the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of great rushing, saying, Blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place. Now, he hears this voice, and then he hears some noise, and here's this visionary thing, this vision thing that he saw in the first chapter. And I heard also the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another. That's, we learned about that in the first chapter. And the noise of the wheels. Remember that whole conglomeration had wheels. It had wings. It had all kinds of fixtures. And the noise in latter part of verse 13, and the noise of great rushing. So here again, he gets this experience one more time. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away. Now that seems that it was. That just seems that he was physically transported to another location. And I went in bitterness, in the heat of my spirit. He was this heat of, he became agitated, angry. This verse suggests that he became agitated. So the Spirit lifted me up, took me away, and I went in bitterness of spirit, in anger, in the heat of my spirit. He was angry, but the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. Did this Son of Man have emotions like us? Did he have feelings? Did he have doubts? Probably, wouldn't you think? But he says the Lord was strong. The hand of the Lord was strong upon me. So then I came to them at the captivity of Tel Aviv. That's not down there by the river Chebar. So however he got there, he got there, that he dwelt by the river Chebar. That river, the canal or the river, there was, it was not at the same location. The population was not at the same location that he had this initial vision. And he said, I sat where they sat and remained there astonished among them 7 days. And it came to pass at the end of 7 days that the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, now he went down among the people, and the scripture says there that he was astonished. He was what? He was just kind of, wow, what's going on here? He was astonished. And he just sat there for 7 days. I suppose he might have been, he saw the condition of the people. He probably thought, well, where am I going to start? What do I do now? I've had these visions of God, the awesomeness of God. I've been transported by the Spirit. He's sitting there among them, apparently not teaching them, for 7 days. In verse 17, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Apparently, the Spirit, the heavenly being, was saying to him, I didn't, you're not here to just sit down, right? You're not here to just be one of them. You're here to be a watchman of the house of Israel. What's a watchman? What would have been a watchman? I don't know that we have watchmen today, do we? Oh, you go past the Chillicothe prison there, which I did yesterday, and there's towers there where they have people watching. What are they watching for at the prison? Well, they're watching for a lot of things, Are there fights breaking out? Somebody trying to clear the wall. Somebody trying to escape. A watchman in that era would be they would have towers on the walls where people would be watching for enemies to come in. Well, they understood what a watchman was. So, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word of my mouth, and give them warning from me. Now, the message was from God. How it was delivered, I'm not sure, but the message was from God. And here was the reasoning. Ezekiel, here's what this is about. You have a commission, and he says there in verse 18, when I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, thou givest him not let me read that again. In terms of giving the warning, when I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not a warning, nor speaketh to warn the wicked from his way, and to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. Now you think about the onus that was put on Ezekiel. You don't warn them, you're doomed. Now isn't that a lot of pressure?
Well, isn't the same true for us?
Pardon me?
Yeah. Isn't the same true for us today?
Yeah, let's pick up on that next week. There's a message there